Imagine a world where whispered secrets held more power than armies, where hidden orders shaped the course of history from the shadows. These weren't just legends, they were real. Across centuries and continents, ancient mystics formed clandestine societies, their influence stretching from the halls of emperors to the hearts of revolutions. Their rituals, their knowledge, their very existence was often erased from history, leaving only fragments for us to piece together. But today, we're pulling back the veil on 30 of these forgotten orders, groups so enigmatic that even their names have been lost to time. Picture this, a monk in a dimly lit scriptorium, carefully encoding forbidden wisdom into manuscripts meant to outlast empires, or a circle of philosophers in a hidden grove, debating ideas so dangerous they could topple kings. These mystics weren't just dreamers, they were architects of destiny. Some sought enlightenment, others power, but all operated in the spaces between what history remembers and what it deliberately obscures. Their stories are woven into the fabric of civilizations, yet their voices have been silenced, their contributions buried under layers of myth and misconception. Why were these orders erased? Who feared them enough to try and wipe them from memory? The answers lie in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. This isn't just a journey into the past, it's a reckoning with the forces that shaped our world. From the desert ascetics who communed with divine visions to the courtly adepts who whispered advice into the ears of rulers, these mystics left behind echoes of their presence. And as we trace those echoes, we'll uncover truths that challenge everything we thought we knew about history, power, and the timeless quest for knowledge. The mystery begins now. Among the most controversial of these forgotten orders were the Ophites, a Gnostic sect whose very name means worshippers of the serpent. In the shadowy corners of the 2nd century, they turned the biblical story of Eden upside down, celebrating the serpent not as a deceiver, but as a divine liberator. To them, the snake was wisdom incarnate, the one who shattered ignorance by offering forbidden knowledge to Adam and Eve. While mainstream Christianity vilified the serpent as an agent of evil, the Ophites saw it as a hero, a rebel against a tyrannical creator god who sought to keep humanity enslaved in blind obedience. Their rituals were as provocative as their beliefs. Some accounts describe ceremonies where live serpents were handled or even kissed, a direct challenge to traditional fears of the creature. Initiates might reenact the temptation in Eden, symbolically consuming fruit to awaken their own divine spark. The Ophites believed that true salvation lay not in faith alone, but in gnosis, secret knowledge that revealed the illusory nature of the material world. This put them at odds with church authorities, who branded them heretics for daring to claim that enlightenment came from within, not through priestly mediation. But the Ophites didn't emerge in a vacuum. Traces of serpent veneration stretch back to ancient Mesopotamia, where the god Ningishzida was depicted as a serpent coiled around a staff, an image later adopted as the rod of Asclepius, symbol of healing. Even older echoes resound in the serpentine deities of Egypt and Crete. Were the Ophites preserving fragments of a far older tradition, one that saw the snake not as a villain but as a guide? Their suppression wasn't just about theology, it was a battle over who controlled the narrative of human destiny. To erase them was to silence an alternative vision of wisdom, one where questioning authority was sacred. Along the sun-baked shores of Lake Merotis in Egypt, an extraordinary community thrived in silence, the Therapeutae. Unlike the Ophites who embraced controversy, these Jewish mystics sought wisdom through solitude, turning away from the chaos of cities to live in scattered hermitages. Their name, meaning healers or servants of God, hinted at their purpose to mend the soul through prayer, study, and sacred music. While historians often focus on the better-known Essenes, the Therapeutae carved their own path, blending Jewish tradition with the philosophical currents of Alexandria. Their daily rhythm was a meditation in itself, At dawn, they would face the rising sun, arms outstretched in prayer, as if drawing divine light into their bodies. Days were spent copying sacred texts or composing hymns, their scriptoriums filled with the scent of papyrus and ink. But it was their nighttime rituals that blurred the line between earth and heaven. Every seventh day, they'd gather in a communal hall, men and women separated by a thin partition, to chant in antiphonal harmonies, voices weaving together in a tapestry of sound said to summon angelic presences. What set them apart wasn't just their asceticism, but their radical inclusivity. Women held equal status as scholars and visionaries, a rarity in antiquity. The philosopher Philo of Alexandria, our primary source on the Therapeutae, marveled at their feasts, simple meals of bread and herbs that transformed into ecstatic spiritual symposia. After eating, they would form concentric circles, dancing barefoot through the night in a trance-like state, their movements mimicking the orbits of celestial bodies. Their legacy rippled far beyond their lakeside retreat. Many scholars see them as a blueprint for Christian monasticism centuries before desert fathers like Anthony the Great. Their emphasis on communal living, contemplative silence, and allegorical scripture interpretation eerily foreshadowed later monastic rules. Some even speculate they were a diaspora branch of the Essenes, sharing their solar calendar and messianic expectations. Yet, unlike the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Therapeutae left no library behind, only whispers in the writings of their admirers. Perhaps their greatest lesson was this: enlightenment could bloom in the quietest corners. While emperors waged wars and temples rose and fell, these mystics proved that transformation often happens not in the spotlight, but in the spaces between, where a single voice in the darkness might just echo farther than 1,000 shouting in the light. Deep beneath the streets of ancient Rome, in candlelit chambers known as Mithraea, soldiers and merchants gathered to partake in rituals so secret that even today we're still piecing them together. This was the world of Mithraism, a mystery cult that swept across the Roman Empire with the fervor of a spiritual revolution. At its heart stood Mithras, a god often depicted slaying a cosmic bull, an image that adorned the altars of underground temples from Britain to Syria. Unlike the public spectacles of Jupiter or Venus, Mithraism thrived in shadows, its rites reserved for initiates who climbed a ladder of 7 grades, each marked by harrowing trials of endurance and faith. What made this cult so compelling? For one, it spoke directly to the Roman military elite. Mithras was a god of contracts, of unbreakable oaths, perfect for an empire built on discipline and loyalty. Soldiers facing the chaos of battle found solace in the cult's promise of order and cosmic harmony. Initiation wasn't for the faint-hearted. Some accounts describe mock burials where candidates were sealed in pits to confront their mortality before emerging reborn. Others hint at ritual feasts where bread and wine mirrored the god's sacred meal with the sun god Sol, a striking parallel to Christian communion that didn't go unnoticed by early church fathers. The Mithraea themselves were marvels of symbolic architecture. Built to resemble caverns, these windowless sanctuaries were aligned with the stars, their ceilings often painted with zodiacs to reflect Mithras' role as master of the cosmos. Initiates progressed through ranks with names like Raven and Lion, each stage revealing deeper layers of astrological and agricultural symbolism. The bull-slaying scene at the center of every temple wasn't just a myth. It was a coded map of the universe, with the bull's blood spawning vines and wheat, linking death to renewal in an endless cycle. But Mithraism's greatest puzzle, why it vanished almost completely despite once rivaling Christianity. Some argue its exclusion of women limited its reach. Others point to its lack of a centralized structure, making it vulnerable when Constantine threw imperial support behind the cross. Yet its legacy lingers. From the winter solstice celebrations that may have influenced Christmas to the persistent image of the sun god's radiance, Mithraism's DNA is woven into traditions we still recognize today. To walk through the ruins of a Mithraeum is to stand where two futures clashed, one that would dominate the medieval world, and one that would become archaeology's most tantalizing enigma. Long before the Enlightenment asked us to question life's meaning, the Orphics were already singing the answers literally. This ancient Greek mystery cult didn't just tell stories about Orpheus, the poet who charmed the underworld with his lyre. They lived his journey. For them, existence was a cycle of death and rebirth, the soul trapped in a prison of flesh until purification rituals could break the chains. Unlike mainstream Greek religion focused on appeasing Olympian gods, the Orphics turned inward, their secret texts promising liberation through ecstatic rites and vegetarianism, a radical idea in a meat-centric culture. Their most startling belief that humans carried a divine spark tangled with titanic sin. According to their creation myth, the first humans arose from ashes of the Titans, who had devoured the god Dionysus as an infant. This made every person both celestial and cursed, a duality resolved only through the Orphic mysteries. Initiates carried thin gold tablets buried with them, inscribed with instructions for navigating the afterlife. One from Thessaly whispers across millennia, "You will find a spring to the left of Hades' hall, guarded by a cypress tree. Say, I am parched with thirst. Let me drink from the waters of memory." Their purification rituals blurred the line between theater and sacrament. Followers wore white linen, abstained from animal sacrifice, and gathered in moonlit groves for ceremonies involving hypnotic music and hallucinogenic brews, perhaps akin to the Kykean drink used in Eleusinian rites. Some scholars believe their hymns contained hidden frequencies, the vibrations aligning mind and body to receive visions. A fragment of their poetry discovered in southern Italy describes the soul's journey. "From the circle of grief and joy, I fly like a bird to the sky's embrace." What set them apart wasn't just their beliefs, but their democratization of the afterlife. While mainstream Greek religion reserved blessed immortality for heroes and demigods, Orphism offered it to any initiate willing to undergo its rigors. Even Plato, though critical of their rituals, borrowed their concept of the soul's immortality for his own philosophy. The Orphics' legacy pulses through Western thought, from Pythagoras' vegetarian communes to Renaissance magicians who sought their lost texts. Their greatest paradox, a movement built around silence, left echoes loud enough to shape civilizations. The island of Croton in southern Italy became the unlikely birthplace of a revolution, not of swords but of numbers. Here, in the 6th century before the Common Era, Pythagoras gathered his followers into a brotherhood where mathematics was sacred, beans were forbidden, and the very fabric of reality vibrated with hidden harmonies. The Pythagoreans weren't just philosophers, they lived as if the universe itself was a grand musical composition, its secrets encoded in ratios and shapes. Their founder was no ordinary teacher. Ancient accounts describe Pythagoras as a figure of almost supernatural magnetism. Some said he could appear in two places at once, calm storms with a glance or converse with animals. Whether myth or memory, these tales hint at the awe he inspired in a world where logic and mysticism danced as partners. At the heart of their belief was a revelation. Numbers weren't merely tools but divine archetypes. The discovery that musical intervals could be expressed as simple ratios, a string divided in half produces an octave, in thirds a perfect fifth, convinced them that mathematics governed everything from planetary motion to human destiny. They worshipped the Tetractes, a pyramid of 10 dots representing cosmic perfection, and saw spiritual significance in every digit. Odd numbers were masculine, evens feminine. 4 symbolized justice, 5 marriage. Their obsession with purity extended to diet: no meat, no beans believed to contain ancestral souls, only foods thought to clarify the mind for communion with the numerical sublime. Initiation was a gauntlet of silence and revelation. New members endured 5 years without speaking, listening to lectures from behind a curtain until deemed worthy to see Pythagoras' face. The inner circle learned that the planets emitted a celestial hum, the so-called music of the spheres, inaudible to mortal ears. Advanced students explored the golden ratio's presence in art and nature, or the uncanny properties of triangular, perfect numbers like 28, equal to the sum of its divisors. Some sources claim they mastered out-of-body travel, using rhythmic breathing to project consciousness beyond physical limits, yet their greatest legacy might be their downfall. When a disgruntled initiate revealed their proof of irrational numbers entities like the square root of 2 that shattered their perfect numerical world-view, the Brotherhood allegedly drowned him for blasphemy. The scandal triggered violent persecutions, scattering Pythagoreans across the Mediterranean, but their ideas survived, seeding Plato's idealism, Renaissance mysticism, and even modern physics. The notion that reality obeys mathematical laws, the very foundation of science, that's Pythagorean heresy turned orthodoxy. Their monasteries may have burned, but their vision of a universe singing in equations still echoes wherever someone finds beauty in the marriage of number and nature. In the mist-shrouded oak groves of ancient Gaul, figures clad in white robes moved between the trees, their hands stained with the juice of sacred plants. These were the Druids, not merely priests, but the living memory of the Celtic world. To their people, they were lawmakers, healers, and intermediaries with the divine, holding a status so revered that warriors would lay down their swords mid-battle at their command. Unlike the structured temples of Rome or Greece, the Druids worshipped in open-air sanctuaries where the whispering leaves and shifting light became their cathedral walls. Their knowledge wasn't written on parchment but memorized in verses that could take 20 years to master, a deliberate choice to keep wisdom from falling into profane hands. What set them apart was their holistic grasp of society. They settled disputes between tribes with judgments so fair even kings bowed to their decisions. Their astronomical observations guided planting and harvests, while their herbal remedies blended practical medicine with spiritual ritual. One surviving account describes a Druid's initiation rite. Candidates spent 9 days and nights in a pitch-dark hut, emerging only when they could recite the entire cosmological system from memory. Their calendar, the Coligny Fragments, reveals a sophisticated understanding of lunar and solar cycles, proving they were far more than primitive shamans. But Rome saw them as a threat. Julius Caesar, in his conquest of Gaul, painted them as barbaric practitioners of human sacrifice, a charge hotly debated by historians today. While archaeological evidence does show ritual offerings, these may have been symbolic or reserved for extreme crises, not the widespread atrocities Roman propaganda claimed. The truth, the Druids were the glue holding Celtic resistance together. Their knowledge of land and tradition made them indispensable to local leaders, and that made them dangerous. By the 1st century, Roman decrees banned Druidic practices entirely. Sacred groves were felled, oral traditions severed, and the survivors driven underground. Yet whispers of their legacy survived. Some scholars argue early Irish Christian monks preserved fragments of Druidic lore in illuminated manuscripts, encoding old gods as saints and transforming spells into prayers. The famous Lewis chessman, carved centuries later, may even depict a Druidic figure hidden among the pieces, a silent nod to wisdom that refused to die. Perhaps their greatest testament is what we still don't know. The very gaps in history speak volumes about their power. A civilization that valued memory over writing, that saw divinity in mistletoe and oak leaves, that measured time by the turning of stars. These weren't primitive mystics. They were the librarians of an entire worldview, one that slipped through our fingers like smoke from a sacred fire. In the intellectual crossroads of the late Roman Empire, where Greek philosophy met Eastern mysticism, a cryptic text emerged that would haunt the imagination of occultists for centuries: the Chaldean oracles. Unlike other mystery traditions, this wasn't a living order but a collection of hexameter verses. said to be dictated by divine beings to a 2nd century sage named Julian the Theurgist. Imagine a philosopher priest, torchlight flickering across his face as he inked words believed to channel the very voice of the gods. These oracles weren't just poetry. They were a roadmap to the cosmos, blending Plato's metaphysics with the star lore of ancient Babylon and rituals to summon celestial powers. At their core was a radical idea. The human soul could ascend through layers of reality by mastering theurgic rites, sacred acts that manipulated divine energies. The universe, they taught, was a ladder of emanation from the ineffable Father at the pinnacle down to the material world, each rung guarded by fiery daemons. To climb it required more than contemplation, it demanded action. Initiates might etch symbols onto lamely, breathe in rhythms aligned with planetary hours, or purify themselves with sulfur and moonlight. One fragment instructs, "Do not soil the spirit by touching the dead, lest you bind yourself to the shadow realms." What set the Chaldeans apart was their fusion of precision and ecstasy. They mapped the heavens with Babylonian exactness. Each planet, zodiac sign, and even fixed stars had specific invocations, yet sought to rupture ordinary consciousness. Their systoses, rites, induced trance states where the soul could temporarily unite with divine intellect. Imagine a ceremony where chanting crescendos as incense clouds swirl, until participants no longer merely worship the gods but become conduits for their presence. Even their cosmology was electrifying. The material world wasn't a prison, as Gnostics claimed, but a training ground where souls forged divinity through struggle. Their influence defied their obscurity. Neoplatonists like Proclus pored over the oracles, calling them the most divine of all books. Renaissance magicians like Marsilio Ficino saw them as a lost key to Hermetic wisdom. And hidden in their fragments are eerie foreshadowings. The fiery wings of the soul resembled Dante's celestial spheres, while their emphasis on divine light echoes later Christian mysticism. Yet the greatest mystery remains. Were these verses genuine revelations or the brilliant synthesis of a mind straddling cultures? The answer might lie in between, in the space where philosophy ends and the numinous begins. In the heat-baked sands of late antiquity, where Egyptian temples still echoed with lost incantations, a figure emerged who would bridge worlds. Hermes Trismegistus, the thrice great sage said to hold the secrets of alchemy, astrology, and divine magic. His followers, the Hermeticists, didn't just study texts, they lived them, treating laboratories as chapels and chemical reactions as prayers. Unlike rigid religious hierarchies, their pursuit was a dance between science and spirit, where turning lead into gold was as much about transforming the soul as it was about metallurgy. Their foundational text, the Corpus Hermeticum, claimed to record dialogues between Hermes and his disciples, revelations so potent that Renaissance scholars would later swear they predated even Moses. At the heart of their practice was the axiom, as above, so below, the belief that the cosmos mirrored the human microcosm. An alchemist boiling mercury in a flask wasn't just conducting an experiment, they were reenacting the birth of stars. Their labs doubled as sacred spaces where precise measurements of planetary alignments determined when to distill elixirs or inscribe talismans. One manual describes a ritual where quicksilver, symbolizing the moon's fluidity, was combined with sulfur, representing solar fire, to create the philosopher's stone, a substance said to grant immortality. But this wasn't mere fantasy. Modern chemistry recognizes their meticulous records of reactions, even if their interpretations were draped in metaphor. Their influence exploded during the Renaissance, when manuscripts long hidden in Byzantine libraries reached Italy. Scholars like Marsilio Ficino paused translating Plato to feverishly copy Hermetic texts, believing they'd uncovered pristine wisdom from before the Great Flood. Giovanni Pico della Mirandola wove Hermeticism into his Oration on the Dignity of Man, framing humanity as the alchemist of its own destiny. Even the vaulted ceilings of chapels like Santa Maria degli Angeli were designed using Hermetic geometric principles, turning architecture into a celestial mirror. But perhaps their most enduring legacy was their refusal to compartmentalize. Where others saw separation, science from religion, body from soul, the Hermeticists saw unity. A recipe for purifying metals might also be instructions for meditation, and a zodiacal chart could map both fate and the body's humors. This holistic vision leaked into unexpected corners. Isaac Newton spent more time decoding Hermetic manuscripts than formulating gravity, and Carl Jung would later mine their symbols for his theory of the collective unconscious. Their greatest lesson, that the pursuit of knowledge is alchemy, an endless refinement where every answer births new mysteries. Along the reed-lined banks of the Tigris and Euphrates, a people who call themselves the Mandeans still practice rituals unchanged for 2,000 years, making them the last surviving Gnostic sect on earth. While others like the Ophites vanished into history, these followers of John the Baptist preserved their esoteric beliefs through centuries of persecution, their very name meaning "those who know." To them, the Baptist wasn't just a prophet but the true Messiah, sent to cleanse souls through living water rather than blood sacrifice. Their sacred texts, written in a unique script resembling ancient Aramaic, describe a cosmos where light and darkness are locked in eternal struggle, and salvation comes not through faith alone but through secret baptisms that reconnect the soul to its celestial home. Their ceremonies are a dance of elements. Each Sunday, priests clad in pure white immerse devotees in flowing rivers, not just once as in Christianity, but repeatedly throughout life to renew spiritual purity. The rituals are precise. The flowing water must be living and never stagnant. The baptizer must face north toward the world of light, and olive branches are dipped to symbolize the soul's ascent. Witnesses describe initiates emerging from these waters with an almost luminous calm, as if momentarily touching another realm, but water is just the beginning. Their most sacred rite, the Masbuta, involves 65 separate prayers, ceremonial vestments woven from undyed wool, and the crafting of clay ritual tables inscribed with cryptic symbols. Survival has demanded cunning adaptations. When Islamic rule forbade them from building temples, the Mandeans turned riverbanks into open-air sanctuaries. When their language faded from daily use, they guarded their liturgies through an unbroken chain of priestly apprenticeships. Even their creation myth reflects resilience. They believed the material world was shaped not by a benevolent god but by a bungling demiurge named Tahil, requiring constant human effort to correct its flaws. This worldview has fueled their endurance. If the universe itself is imperfect, why should they expect safety? Yet modernity poses unprecedented threats. From a population of hundreds of thousands a century ago, fewer than 50,000 remain, scattered by war in Iraq and Syria. Their priests, who must trace their lineage back to John the Baptist, are dwindling. Only a handful of elderly clerics still know how to prepare the sacred myrtle wreaths used in weddings. Paradoxically, diaspora has brought both peril and preservation. Communities in Michigan and Australia now digitize crumbling manuscripts, while young Mandeans blend ancient hymns with electronic music to keep traditions alive. Their story isn't just about the past, it's a test of whether the world's most fragile wisdom tradition can outlast the tides of history once more. High in the mountains of northern Iraq, where the air thins and the horizon stretches endlessly, the Yazidis have guarded a secret for centuries, one that's been twisted into dangerous myths. At the heart of their faith stands Melek Taus, the peacock angel, a figure so misunderstood that it's cost this community unimaginable suffering. To outsiders, the name might evoke images of fallen angels or devil worship, but the truth is far more poetic. In Yazidi cosmology, Melek Taus isn't a force of evil but the leader of 7 archangels, entrusted by God to oversee the world. When he refused to bow to Adam, it wasn't out of rebellion, it was devotion. How could an angel bow to clay when his allegiance belonged solely to the divine? This act of loyalty, misinterpreted as pride, became the cornerstone of a faith that sees light where others imagine darkness. Their rituals are as vivid as their theology. Every autumn, Yazidis gather at the shrine of Lalish, a valley dotted with conical spires where the earth is said to have first hardened from primordial chaos. Here they anoint doorways with sacred oil, light hundreds of wicks in a cavern called the House of Snakes, and circle the mausoleum of Sheikh Adi, their most revered saint, in a slow, sunwise dance. The air hums with the sound of tambourines and the scent of myrrh, each gesture preserving traditions that trace back to ancient Mesopotamian rites. Even their clothing whispers symbolism. The white robes of priests echo the purity of the peacock angel's light, while the red belts tied around their waists represent the eternal bond between heaven and earth. But their most profound secret lies in their oral tradition. Unlike religions bound by scripture, Yazidi teachings are passed mouth to ear, never written down. Their hymns of revelation, known as quls, speak of a world woven from divine emanations, where the soul migrates through cycles until it achieves unity with the cosmic sun. This secrecy, meant to protect, has instead fueled suspicion. For generations, they've been labeled devil worshippers by neighbors who conflate Melek Taus with Lucifer, a tragic case of mistaken identity that's led to massacres, most brutally under ISIS, which sought to erase them entirely. Yet resilience pulses through their culture. The Yazidis' survival hinges on a concept called ex-weed, the idea that divinity isn't confined to a single form but radiates through sacred stones, springs, and even the wind that rushes through their mountains. When ISIS destroyed their temples, they rebuilt them brick by brick, chanting, "The peacock's feathers cannot be plucked." Today, diaspora communities from Germany to Nebraska keep the rites alive, teaching children the stories their ancestors whispered in hiding. Their existence is a defiant testament to a truth as old as their faith. Light often wears misunderstood colors, and what some call heresy, others call home. In the rugged highlands of 10th century Bulgaria, where Orthodox Christianity clashed with lingering pagan beliefs, a radical movement took root, one that would terrify emperors and inspire heretics across Europe. The Bogomils, named after their founder, the priest Bogomil, saw the world as a battleground between two gods, one of spirit, the other of matter. To them, the material universe wasn't created by the benevolent God of the New Testament, but by a fallen angel they called Satanael, a twisted demiurge who fashioned prisons of flesh and stone to trap divine sparks. This wasn't just theology, it was rebellion. In a society where the church flaunted gold-clad icons and landowning bishops grew fat off peasant labor, the Bogomils preached that true worship required poverty, vegetarianism, and the rejection of all sacraments tied to the physical world. Their rituals stripped Christianity bare. Crosses, they spat on them as instruments of torture, unworthy of veneration. Baptism, a pointless dunking in Satan's water. Even the Eucharist repulsed them. Why consume bread when the body itself was a corrupt illusion? Instead, their worship centered on the Lord's Prayer, recited with palms upturned to the sky, believed to carry their words directly to the true God beyond the material veil. Initiation had stages. Listeners attended secret nighttime gatherings in caves or forests. Believers renounced marriage and property. The perfected, elect lived as wandering ascetics, their sunken cheeks and threadbare robes walking indictments of the establishment's excess. Yet their greatest threat wasn't their austerity, it was their subversion. Bogomil priests, many of them women, taught that Satan had forged the Old Testament to deceive humanity, and that Christ was a phantom who never truly took flesh. To Byzantine authorities, this wasn't just heresy, it was anarchy. Emperor Alexios Komnenos recorded their underground network in horrified detail. How they infiltrated noble households as servants, how their coded handshakes identified allies, how they dismissed the emperor himself as Satan's vicar. Persecution followed: burnings, blindings, forced conversions, but like dandelion seeds, brutality only scattered their ideas farther. By the 12th century, Bogomil missionaries had carried their doctrines west, where they took root in the fertile soil of Occitania's discontent. There, they evolved into the Cathars, whose tragic fate at Montségur would echo Bogomil teachings. Even their symbols survived in plain sight. The white-robed good men of Cathar regions mirrored Bogomil ascetics, while their shared belief in reincarnation hinted at older, possibly Manichaean roots. Today, in remote Bulgarian villages, whispers persist of white Christians who hid their scriptures in honey jars to preserve them from flames. The Bogomils may have been erased from official history, but their ghost lingers, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous ideas are those that refuse to die quietly. Amid the sun-drenched hills of medieval Languedoc, where troubadours sang of courtly love and castles crowned limestone cliffs, an unthinkable heresy took root, one that would ignite the first crusade ever launched by Christians against Christians. The Cathars, inheritors of Bogomil dualism, didn't just challenge the church, they rejected its very foundation. To them, Rome was the whore of Babylon, the Pope a fraud, and the material world from the gold on altars to the flesh in beds, a grotesque illusion spun by Satan. Their name, derived from the Greek katharos, meaning pure, hinted at their uncompromising vision. Salvation required absolute separation from corruption, even if that meant refusing marriage, meat, or wealth. While most medieval peasants starved under feudal lords, Cathar perfecti wandered barefoot, their gaunt frames clad in simple black robes, living testaments to a truth that terrified the powerful, that holiness needed no cathedral. Their cosmology was as poetic as it was provocative. They spoke of fallen souls trapped in a counterfeit creation like fireflies bottled in clay, Christ. A radiant phantom who never truly suffered on the cross, for how could divinity stoop to inhabit matter? The Virgin Mary, a celestial symbol, not a woman of flesh. These weren't abstract debates, they struck at the heart of medieval power. When a Cathar preacher declared baptism useless because holy water is just river water with a priest's breath blown over it, or mocked confession by saying, a wolf won't spare sheep just because they bleat their sins, it wasn't just theology. It was class warfare disguised as heresy. Local nobles, weary of tithes and Rome's interference, often protected the Cathars, turning Languedoc into a land where bishops trembled and peasants dared to dream of purity. Then came the flames. In 1209, Pope Innocent Roman III unleashed the Albigensian Crusade, offering crusaders absolution for slaughtering heretics and seizing their land. The Siege of Béziers became legend. When soldiers asked how to distinguish Cathars from faithful Catholics, the papal legate reportedly snarled, "Kill them all." God will know his own. 20,000 perished in a single day, the cathedral burned with people trapped inside, and the nearby river ran red with blood. Yet persecution only deepened the mystery. Perfecti held secret midnight rites in mountain caves, passing the consolamentum, their only sacrament, a laying on of hands to transfer divine light. Followers starved themselves in prison to receive it before execution, believing a single touch could liberate their souls forever. The last stand at Montségur in 1244 became their tragic apotheosis. For months, 200 Cathars held the mountain fortress against 10,000 crusaders until betrayal forced surrender. On March 16th, as spring winds carried the scent of blooming heather, over 200 perfecti walked willingly into a giant pyre, singing hymns as the fire consumed them. Legends say a handful escaped under cover of night, carrying a treasure far more precious than gold, perhaps lost scriptures or the secret gnosis of their faith. Today, the ruins still draw pilgrims who leave white stones in silent tribute. The Cathar's greatest paradox, a movement that saw the world as a prison left behind the most enduring testament to spiritual freedom. The courage to die for an idea, even when the idea itself was erased. Imagine waking up one morning convinced you were beyond sin, that every action, no matter how scandalous, was as pure as divine will itself. This was the explosive creed of the Brethren of the Free Spirit, a shadowy network of medieval mystics who sent church authorities into apoplectic fury. Unlike the Cathars, who saw the material world as evil, the Free Spirits embraced it with terrifying abandon, claiming that those who'd achieved spiritual perfection could neither sin nor be bound by moral laws. Their doctrine wasn't just heresy, it was an existential threat to the very fabric of medieval society, one that turned taverns into chapels and orgies into sacraments. At the heart of their rebellion was the concept of the deified man. Through intense meditation and ecstatic experiences, adherents believed they could shed their individual selves and merge with God's essence, becoming what one inquisitor's transcript called "godded with God." A free spirit might declare, "I am eternal, for I am God," and mean it literally. This wasn't metaphorical enlightenment, it was a lived reality where stealing, lying, or even sexual excess became indifferent acts, since those who are one with the all cannot defile it. Their most infamous slogan, "Every creature must be to me as God," wasn't just philosophy, it was licensed to smash taboos with gleeful impunity. Their practices were as radical as their theology. In underground gatherings across Germany, France, and the Low Countries, initiates practiced holy nudism, stripping bare to symbolize their return to Edenic innocence. Others held love feasts where communal intercourse blurred the line between worship and debauchery. Most shocking to medieval sensibilities was their treatment of property. They saw theft as a sacred act, since all things are common in God. When a free spirit stole bread, they weren't committing a crime but demonstrating that material possessions were illusions to be transcended. The Church reacted with unmatched ferocity. Pope Clement V condemned them in 1312, and inquisitors penned treatises warning of their diabolical liberty. One persecutor described finding a free spirit cell where members burned crucifixes, declaring, "We need no mediator but ourselves." Executions piled up, women drowned in sacks, men burned at the stake with their tongues cut out to silence their blasphemies. Yet the movement proved hydra-headed, crushed one circle, and 3 more emerged in its place. What makes them hauntingly modern is their unresolved paradox. Were they charlatans using mysticism as cover for hedonism, or genuine visionaries who glimpsed a truth too dangerous for their era? Their legacy slithered into unexpected places. Some scholars trace threads to Renaissance Hermeticists, while others see eerie echoes in modern self-deification movements. The free spirits didn't just challenge authority, they asked a question we still grapple with today. If you truly believed you were beyond good and evil, how would you live? Their answer was a flame that scorched the medieval mind, bright, brief, and impossible to forget. In the wake of Europe's bloody religious wars, a series of cryptic pamphlets surfaced that would ignite centuries of speculation. The Rosicrucian Manifestos. Signed by an invisible brotherhood claiming to possess ancient alchemical and mystical secrets, these texts promised nothing less than the transformation of the world. The Forma Fraternitates and Confessio Fraternitates, published between 1614 and 1615, told of a mythical founder, Christian Rosencreuz, who supposedly traveled to the East, returning with wisdom that could heal the fractures of Christendom. Was this a genuine call for spiritual reform, an elaborate hoax, or something stranger? The answer lies in the twilight between legend and history, where symbols breathe like living things. The manifestos read like riddles wrapped in enigmas. They spoke of an invisible college of adepts working behind the scenes, their identities concealed beneath the everyday roles of scholars, artists, and even rulers. To join them, one couldn't apply, they had to be chosen, their worthiness proven through intellectual and moral purity. The texts teased impossible knowledge, how to prolong life, transmute metals, and communicate with celestial beings. Yet they also demanded radical humility. Wealthy patrons offering gold for secrets were turned away, while impoverished scholars might find mysterious strangers funding their education. This paradox, grandeur cloaked in secrecy, wisdom paired with service, became the Rosicrucian trademark. Alchemy was their public face, but their deeper goal was spiritual alchemy. Where others saw lead and gold as mere elements, Rosicrucians viewed them as metaphors for the soul's journey from base materialism to enlightenment. Their symbols were multi-layered. The rose blooming at the center of the cross wasn't just decoration but a map of consciousness. The flower representing the unfolding soul, the cross the material world it transcended. Even their name whispered duality. Rossi Crucis could mean Rose of the Cross, or, as some cipher enthusiasts proposed, an acronym for phrases like Roti Mundi Sacra, Sacred Wheel of the World. Their influence spread like unseen ink. Descartes was accused of Rosicrucian ties after vanishing for years, only to reappear with his revolutionary ideas. Shakespeare's The Tempest, with its themes of hidden knowledge and benevolent magic, drips with Rosicrucian undertones. Later, figures like Isaac Newton and Benjamin Franklin would study their texts, seeking clues to nature's laws. Yet the Brotherhood itself remained spectral, no membership rolls, no headquarters, just whispers of encounters with robed figures who vanished after imparting cryptic advice. Modern Rosicrucian orders claim descent, but historians remain divided. Were the original manifestos propaganda for Lutheran reform, a prank by Tübingen intellectuals, or the tip of a genuine esoteric iceberg? The truth might lie in their enduring appeal. In an age of division, their vision of a hidden harmony where science, art, and spirituality entwine still beckons like a rose glimpsed in twilight, beautiful, fleeting, and never quite within grasp. Beneath the white mantles adorned with the crimson cross, the Knights Templar guarded secrets far more valuable than the gold they supposedly hoarded. While history remembers them as warrior monks protecting pilgrims, their true legacy whispers of lost rituals, arcane knowledge, and a treasure that may not have been earthly at all. Founded in 1118 to safeguard travelers to Jerusalem, the order rapidly evolved into something unprecedented. A multinational empire with its own navy, banking system, and rumors of artifacts ranging from the Ark of the Covenant to the Holy Grail. Their sudden rise and catastrophic fall read less like medieval history and more like a mystery penned by the gods themselves. At the heart of their enigma lies the Temple of Solomon. For 9 years after their founding, the original 9 knights allegedly excavated beneath the temple's ruins, but what they sought remains debated. Some accounts claim they uncovered ancient manuscripts containing pre-Christian wisdom, possibly passed down from Essene mystics or even earlier secret societies. Others suggest they found fragments of the true cross or the legendary Tetragrammaton, the unspeakable name of God said to grant power over creation. Whatever their discovery, it transformed them. Within decades, these poor fellow soldiers of Christ became architects of Gothic cathedrals, their designs embedding sacred geometry and astrological alignments that still baffle scholars. The sudden sophistication of structures like Chartres Cathedral, built with optical illusions and acoustics that induce trance states, hints at knowledge beyond the era's mainstream understanding. Their banking system only deepened the mystery. Pilgrims could deposit funds in Paris and withdraw them in Jerusalem using encoded letters of credit, an innovation so advanced it seemed almost alchemical. Some historians propose their true treasure wasn't gold but this financial revolution itself, a system so threatening to kings and popes that it sealed their fate. Yet eyewitness accounts from their trials tell stranger tales. Under torture, some knights confessed to worshipping a severed head called Baphomet, described alternately as a gilded skull, a crystal relic, or even an automaton that spoke prophecies. Modern scholars dismiss these as coerced fabrications, but fringe theories persist. Was Baphomet a metaphor for Gnostic wisdom, a misunderstood Templar seal depicting the divine feminine? Or, as some alchemical texts suggest, a symbolic representation of the philosopher's stone? Their downfall came with the swiftness of a guillotine. On Friday the 13th of October 1307, King Philip IV of France, deeply in debt to the order, ordered every Templar in his realm arrested simultaneously. Charges ranged from heresy to sodomy, their confessions extracted through methods that would make even the hardest inquisitor wince. The strappado suspended victims by wrists tied behind their backs, dislocating shoulders with each drop. Grand Master Jacques de Molay's final act cemented their legend. Burned alive in 1314, he reportedly cursed the king and pope from the flames, predicting both would die within a year. Remarkably, they did a coincidence that birthed 1,000 legends. What survives today are fragments wrapped in riddles. Their symbols appear in unexpected places, from the dollar bill's all-seeing eye to the compass and square motifs of Freemasonry. Rumors persist that surviving knights smuggled relics to Scotland, where their influence shaped the rise of speculative masonry. Even their famous Red Cross resurfaces in unlikely contexts, like the insignia of the Swiss Guard. Perhaps their greatest secret wasn't any single artifact, but the realization that power flows not from wealth or weapons, but from knowledge carefully concealed in plain sight, a lesson that echoes through every shadowy corridor of history. High in the Alborz mountains of Persia, where eagles circled jagged peaks and fortress walls clung to cliffs like spiderwebs, an order of warriors perfected the art of vanishing, both into the landscape and into history. The Hashashin or Nizari Ismailis weren't just assassins, they were masters of psychological warfare, turning fear into their sharpest weapon. While medieval Europe spun tales of their dagger-wielding fanatics leaping from shadows, the truth was far more calculated. Their strength lay not in numbers, but in precision, a single, impeccably timed strike that could topple empires without raising an army. Their founder, Hassan I Sabbah, was a scholar turned revolutionary. Seizing the impregnable fortress of Alamut in 1090, he declared independence from both Sunni caliphs and rival Shiite factions, but his real genius was in recruitment. Young men from impoverished villages were brought to Alamut's gardens, not the barren crag outsiders saw, but a hidden paradise of flowing water and fruit trees. After days of feasting and opium-laden wine earning them the nickname hashish eaters, though historians debate this, they'd awaken back in the austere fortress. Told they'd glimpsed paradise, they were promised eternity there if they martyred themselves in service. It was psychology worthy of modern special forces. Create absolute devotion through sensory manipulation and celestial reward. Their assassinations were theatrical performances designed to paralyze enemies with dread. Targets, often viziers or generals threatening Nizari communities, would wake to find a dagger planted in their pillow or a cryptic note pinned to their robe with a knife. The message was clear: resistance is futile when your walls mean nothing. Some accounts describe Hashashin sitting openly in a target's court for months, gaining trust before striking in broad daylight, then surrendering without resistance. Death wasn't the sole goal, the spectacle was. When Saladin, the legendary sultan, found a poisoned cake and a threatening verse beside his bed, he abruptly halted his siege of their strongholds. What's often overlooked is their intellectual legacy. Alamut wasn't just a fortress but a library. Hassan stocked it with works on astronomy, medicine, and philosophy, insisting his followers master languages and science alongside combat. They pioneered encryption, using poetry as coded messages, and their network of spies stretched from Cairo to Samarkand. Later, when Mongol hordes crushed Alamut in 1256, survivors allegedly infiltrated the courts of Genghis Khan's descendants, whispering subversive ideas that may have softened the empire's brutality. The Hashashin's true weapon wasn't the dagger but the mind. Their tactics foreshadowed modern asymmetrical warfare, proving that a handful of determined souls, armed with patience and theatrical terror, could defy superpowers. Today, their name echoes in the word assassin, but their lesson is broader. Sometimes the deadliest force isn't an army, but an idea sharpened to a point and plunged into history's ribs. In the bustling markets of medieval Baghdad or the moonlit courtyards of Ottoman Istanbul, a revolution was unfolding, one not of swords but of spinning robes and pounding drums. The forgotten Sufi orders, or tariqas, weren't just mystical fraternities, they were living rivers of ecstasy, carrying Islam's heart from the deserts of Arabia to the jungles of Indonesia. While their names Bektashi, Mevlevi, Qadariyya might not echo as loudly today, their influence shaped empires and ignited spiritual fires that still burn in hidden corners of the world. Take the Bektashis, for example. Founded by the enigmatic Haji Bektash Veli in 13th century Anatolia, they became the spiritual backbone of the Ottoman Janissaries, the empire's elite warrior corps. But their practices would shock orthodox imams. They gathered in ceremonies where men and women danced together, recited poetry praising Ali as the divine light, and passed a shared cup of wine, not as indulgence but as a symbol of unity with God. Their most sacred ritual, the Sema, involved spinning with arms outstretched, one palm facing heaven, the other earth, becoming living conduits between realms. To outsiders, it looked like heresy. To initiates, it was the purest form of surrender. Then there were the Mevlevis, the famed, whirling dervishes of Rumi. Most know their mesmerizing spins, but few realize each movement was a precise cosmology. The right hand raised to receive divine grace, the left turned downward to channel it to the world. Their white robes symbolized death to the ego, while the felt caps represented tombstones of the earthly self. Even their music was mathematical. The ney flute's mournful wail mirrored the soul's longing to return to the reed bed of creation. When the Mongols sacked Konya, it wasn't warriors who rebuilt the city's spirit. It was these twirling mystics turning trauma into transcendence. Further south, the Qadariyya order took a radically different path. Founded by Abdul Qadir Jilani in 12th century Baghdad, they emphasized silent meditation and strenuous asceticism. Followers might bury themselves in sand up to the neck under the desert sun, or hang upside down in wells for days, seeking annihilation of the self. Yet their most enduring legacy was stealth. As Islam spread across Africa, Qadariyya saints adapted local animist traditions, converting sacred groves into meditation sites, repurposing drum ceremonies as dhikr, remembrance of God. In Timbuktu, their manuscripts blended Quranic verses with Berber folk wisdom, creating a theological bridge that made Islam resonate across cultures. What united these disparate orders wasn't doctrine, but a shared hunger for direct experience of the divine. The Khalwatiyya in Persia practiced 40-day isolation in pitch-black cells, emerging with visions that guided sultans. The Kishtiyya of India fed thousands in free kitchens, believing service was the highest form of prayer, and the Shadhiliyya of North Africa turned perfume-making into worship, distilling roses while reciting the 99 names of God, their shops doubling as clandestine teaching circles during times of persecution. Their collective genius lay in camouflage. When rulers banned Sufi gatherings, the orders simply went underground, teaching through textile patterns in carpet weaving, embedding coded messages in music, or disguising theological debates as coffeehouse storytelling. Today, their legacy lingers in unexpected places, from flamenco's footwork, rooted in Moorish Sufi dances, to the blues' melancholy scales echoing African Sufi lamentations. These weren't just mystics, they were the original cultural hackers, proving that the most powerful revolutions often spin, whisper, or dance their way into history. In the dusty hills of 16th century Safed, a quiet revolution unfolded as a group of Jewish mystics reshaped the spiritual landscape forever. This small Galilean town became the unlikely epicenter of Kabbalah, where luminaries like Isaac Luria, Moses Cordovero, and Joseph Caro transformed ancient esoteric traditions into a living, breathing path to the divine. Unlike earlier Kabbalists who whispered secrets in secluded study halls, the Safed Circle believed their revelations were urgent messages for a broken world, one trembling on the brink of redemption. At the heart of their teachings was Isaac Luria's cosmic drama, the Tzimtzum. Picture this: before creation, God wasn't absent but too present, so boundless that nothing else could exist. To make space for the universe, the divine contracted like a held breath, withdrawing into itself. But when light poured into the void, the vessels meant to contain it shattered, scattering divine sparks into the chaos of existence. Humanity's task to gather these sparks through prayer, ritual, and righteous living, a process called tikkun olam, the mending of creation itself. This wasn't just philosophy, it was a call to action. Every mitzvah performed, every kindness extended, became a cosmic rescue mission. Their rituals pulsed with intensity. On Friday evenings, dressed in white like angels, they'd march into the fields to welcome the Sabbath bride, not metaphorically, but as if she were tangible. Luria's disciples practiced yichudim, complex meditations merging Hebrew letters and divine names to repair spiritual fractures. Even their sleep was sacred. Joseph Caro, author of the monumental Shulchan Aruch, received nightly visitations from a heavenly mentor called the Maggid, whose words he transcribed in ecstatic trances. But Safed's mysticism was steeped in earthly urgency. Expelled from Spain in 1492, these scholars saw their suffering as birth pangs of the Messiah. Luria's inner circle believed redemption was imminent if they could just complete the final tikkun. When word spread that the river Sambation, legendary barrier holding back the lost tribes, had calmed, some packed their bags, convinced the end was near. Their fervor birthed customs still practiced today: the Kabbalat Shabbat service, the Tu B'Shvat Seder, even the custom of tying red strings around wrists as protection, all innovations from Safed's golden age. Yet their legacy is bittersweet. Luria died at 38, leaving disciples to interpret his fragmented teachings. Rival schools clashed over his true vision, while false messiahs like Shabbatai Zivai twisted Kabbalah into scandal. Modern New Age commodification risks diluting their depth, but in Safed's ancient stone alleys their presence lingers. Walk the cobblestones at dawn and you might still feel it. The unshakable belief that human actions, no matter how small, send ripples through the fabric of existence. High in the rugged mountains where Lebanon meets Syria and Israel, a people guard mysteries so profound that even their closest neighbors know almost nothing of their true beliefs. The Druze, emerging in 11th century Cairo as an offshoot of Ismaili Islam, became something entirely distinct. A spiritual tradition so secretive that most of its own adherents are never taught its deepest doctrines. At first glance, they might appear as just another Middle Eastern minority, but beneath the surface lies one of history's most impenetrable esoteric systems, where layers of initiation separate the curious from those entrusted with the full truth. Their origins trace back to the reign of the Fatimid Caliph al-Hakim, a ruler whose erratic behavior and sudden disappearance spawned legends. Some whispered he was divine, others that he had gone mad. Into this chaos stepped Hamza ibn Ali, a Persian mystic who proclaimed al-Hakim as the ultimate manifestation of God, not just a caliph but the cosmic intellect itself. When al-Hakim vanished in 1021, Hamza and his followers scattered, carrying their revelations into the mountains. What began as a radical Ismaili movement soon transformed into something far more enigmatic, blending Neoplatonic philosophy, Gnostic dualism, and even traces of Hindu reincarnation beliefs into a synthesis unlike anything else in the Abrahamic world. Central to Druze theology is the concept of Tawhid, not merely monotheism but the utter unity of all existence with the divine. They believe in a cyclical cosmos where souls reincarnate in a process called takamas, always reborn within the Druze community until achieving spiritual perfection. But here's the twist: the doors to conversion closed in the year 1043. No outsiders may join, and no one born Druze can leave without severing all ties. A policy that's preserved their identity through centuries of persecution but also fueled wild speculation. Their society operates on two tiers: the Juhul, or ignorant, make up most of the population, living outwardly as secular Muslims or even Christians when necessary, observing basic ethics but unaware of the esoteric teachings. The Occult, or knowing, undergo rigorous initiation, learning secret texts like the Epistles of Wisdom, which are never written down but passed orally among elders. These elect wear distinctive white turbans and dark robes, gathering at night in austere meeting houses called kolwas, to study allegorical interpretations of scripture that would stagger mainstream theologians. What truly sets them apart is their concept of divine incarnation. While mainstream Islam rejects any human manifestation of God, the Druze believe divine essence has cyclically appeared through 7 mouthpieces from Adam to Hamza, with Al-Hakim as the final, supreme manifestation. This belief, combined with their veneration of figures like Jethro, the biblical father-in-law of Moses, whose shrine they maintain in Galilee, creates a theological tapestry interwoven with threads from countless traditions. Historically, their survival strategy has been masterful ambiguity. Under Muslim rule, they practiced taqiyya, concealing their faith to avoid persecution. Under Christian crusaders, some outwardly embraced crosses while secretly maintaining their rites. Even today, Druze in different nations adapt seamlessly, serving as high-ranking officers in the Israeli military, influential politicians in Lebanon, or respected merchants in Syria, all while keeping their inner teachings fiercely guarded. The few glimpses outsiders have caught are tantalizing. Medieval travelers told of Druze holy men who could read thoughts or control animals. Modern scholars note their unusually high rates of endogamous marriage, preserving not just bloodlines but esoteric knowledge. And their emphasis on communal loyalty is legendary, whether rescuing Jewish neighbors during pogroms or sheltering Christians during sectarian violence. They've long played the role of quiet mediators in a turbulent region. Perhaps their greatest lesson is in the power of silence. In an age where every secret is commodified, the Druze remind us that some truths resist exposure not out of fear, but because their power lies in the seeking, not the finding. Their mountains hold whispers of a faith that has outlasted empires by knowing when to speak, when to vanish, and when to let the world wonder. Among the twisting alleyways of Ottoman Anatolia, where dervishes spun and poets whispered verses to the moon, the Bektashi Sufi order carved out a space unlike any other, a sanctuary where Muslims, Christians, and even atheists could gather under one roof, united not by dogma but by the shared pursuit of divine love. Founded in the 13th century by Haji Bektash Veli, a mystic whose teachings blurred the lines between Islam, Christianity, and ancient shamanism, the Bektashis became the spiritual compass for the Ottoman Empire's most feared warriors, the Janissaries. But behind their reputation as military chaplains lay a tradition so radically inclusive that it would make modern interfaith dialogue seem tame by comparison. At the heart of Bektashi practice was the Sem ceremony, a gathering that defied every convention of its time. Men and women sat together, a scandalous notion in medieval Islam, passing a single cup of wine, not for intoxication, but as a symbol of unity with the divine. Their rituals wove together elements that would horrify Orthodox clerics: veneration of Ali, the cousin of Prophet Muhammad, as a cosmic figure of light, rhythmic dances resembling Christian whirling, even traces of pre-Islamic Turkic sky worship. One traveler's account describes a Bektashi lodge where the call to prayer was given not from a minaret, but under a great oak tree hung with votive rags, a practice echoing both Sufi hikah and pagan tree cults. Their relationship with the Janissaries was no accident of history. When Sultan Murad I sought to create an elite corps of slave soldiers in the 14th century, he turned to the Bektashis to instill unshakable loyalty. The order's initiates underwent rites mirroring Janissary training. Both were called ashiks, lovers. Both embraced celibacy, and both saw their barracks as monasteries. Before battle, Janissaries would touch their distinctive white felt caps to the tomb of Haji Bektash, believing his blessing made them invincible. The caps themselves bore spiritual significance. Their dangling rear flaps represented the humility of the dervish, forever bowing before God. Yet the Bektashis' true power lay in their coded resistance to authority. Their poetry, composed in simple Turkish rather than elite Persian or Arabic, carried subversive double meanings. A line like "the truth is one, though the sages call it by many names," might sound pious to a sultan's censor, but initiates Nuit-endorsed heresies like pantheism. When the Ottomans banned coffee houses as hotbeds of dissent, Bektashi lodges secretly served it in ritual contexts, turning caffeine into a sacrament of free thought. Their decline came brutally in 1826, when Sultan Mahmud II crushed the Janissaries in a bloody purge, and with them their spiritual guides. Bektashi lodges were shuttered, their libraries burned, and surviving followers driven underground. But like water finding cracks in stone, their influence seeped into unlikely places. Albanian nationalists used Bektashi networks to organize against Ottoman rule. Freemasons in 19th century Istanbul found their symbols eerily familiar. Even today, in the mountains of Kosovo or the backstreets of Cairo, you might stumble upon an old man sipping tea beside a rose garden, humming a tune that carries 7 centuries of unbroken defiance, a living thread to a time when mystics proved that the fiercest revolutions begin not with swords, but with shared cups and whirling skirts under the same indifferent stars. High in the misty peaks of Mount Koya, where ancient cedars whisper with the wind, Japanese monks have kept alive a tradition so visually stunning it seems to pull heaven down to earth. The Shingon Buddhists, founded in the 9th century by the visionary monk Kyukai, didn't just meditate on enlightenment. They built it, painted it, and performed it in rituals of breathtaking complexity. Unlike other Buddhist schools that saw awakening as the work of countless lifetimes, Shingon offered a radical promise. Through precise visualization, sacred gestures, and esoteric rituals, one could achieve Buddhahood in a single body. This wasn't passive spirituality, it was a full sensory assault on the ordinary, a cosmic workout for the soul. At the heart of their practice were the mandalas, not mere artwork but living maps of the universe. The Ryokai mandala, a paired set of the womb and diamond worlds, presented existence as a glittering lattice of interconnected deities, each representing an aspect of cosmic truth. Initiates would meditate on these intricate designs, memorizing every curve and color until they could walk through them in their mind's eye. But this was no casual stroll. It was a carefully choreographed journey where every step corresponded to stages of spiritual awakening. The womb world mapped the womb of compassion, its concentric circles radiating like ripples from a divine center. The diamond world crackled with crystalline precision, its geometric patterns mirroring the indestructible nature of wisdom. Together, they formed a spiritual DNA helix, the blueprint for transformation. Their rituals were equally elaborate. The Goma fire ceremony, still performed today, turns prayer into physics. Monks chant as they feed wooden sticks into flames, each piece inscribed with desires to be purified. The crackling fire becomes a living mandala, its heat and light symbolizing the burning away of illusion. But the most awe-inspiring rites were the Quechian Kanjo, secret initiations conducted in pitch darkness. Blindfolded, disciples would toss flower petals onto a mandala spread across the temple floor. Where the petals landed revealed which Buddha they had, a karmic connection with a deity who would guide their practice for life. Some accounts describe initiates fainting from the intensity, overwhelmed by visions of radiant beings stepping from the mandala's surface. Kyukai himself was a figure of almost mythical prowess. Fluent in Sanskrit, he brought back from China not just texts but an entire system of Mikyo esoteric Buddhism, adapting it to Japan's mountains and seasons. His genius lay in democratizing the mystical, using art, sound, and movement to convey truths too profound for words. Shingon's chanting wasn't mere recitation. It harnessed sacred syllables believed to vibrate in resonance with celestial bodies. Their mudra's intricate hand gestures were said to literally reshape energy in the body. Even walking meditation followed star patterns, turning the human form into a living constellation. What makes Shingon uniquely compelling is its refusal to separate spirit from matter. Where some traditions scorned the physical as illusion, Shingon monks saw the body as the ultimate ritual instrument. Breathing synchronized with mantras, saliva used to consecrate offerings, even the alignment of the skeleton during meditation, all became part of the alchemy of awakening. Modern neuroscientists studying their practices note striking parallels. The mandala's fractal patterns activate the brain's visual cortex much like a spiritual QR code, while their chanting produces brainwaves associated with deep focus and bliss. Yet for all its splendor, Shingon's greatest secret might be its resilience. When political upheavals banned its practices, monks hid mandalas in farmhouses, disguising them as folding screens. During wartime, they memorized rituals to avoid leaving written traces. Today, travelers to Mount Koya can still witness dawn ceremonies where monks become living bridges between realms, their voices rising with the smoke of incense, weaving a tapestry of sound and symbol that's remained unbroken for 12 centuries, proof that some mysteries refuse to be forgotten. On the charnel grounds of Varanasi, where funeral pyres burn night and day and the Ganges carries both ashes and offerings, the Aghori monks perform rituals that would make most souls recoil. These aren't mere ascetics seeking quiet enlightenment, they are spiritual shock troops, deliberately smashing every societal taboo to dismantle the illusion of duality itself. Clad in human ash rather than robes, using skulls as bowls, and meditating atop corpses in various states of decomposition, their path isn't just extreme, it's a deliberate inversion of all that's considered sacred or profane. At first glance, their practices seem designed to provoke smearing themselves with cremation pyre soot, consuming food scavenged from rotting offerings, even engaging in ritualized cannibalism. But beneath the surface horror lies a razor-sharp philosophy. The Aghori seek to annihilate the mental constructs that label one thing pure and another impure, one action sacred and another sinful. By embracing what revolts us, death, decay, bodily fluids, they expose the arbitrary nature of human aversion. If everything is divine, as Hindu non-dualism teaches, then even the most repulsive aspects of existence must contain sacredness. Their lineage traces back to the legendary Kabbalistic sect, medieval tantrics who carried skulls as begging bowls, but the Aghori refined this into a systematic path. Unlike monks who withdraw from society, they immerse themselves in its darkest corners, not out of nihilism, but as alchemists transmuting fear into liberation. When an Aghori sips river water from a half-burned human cranium, they aren't desecrating the dead. They're demonstrating that form is fleeting, and attachment to physicality is the root of suffering. Modern practitioners describe their rituals as accelerated enlightenment. By confronting what we instinctively flee, the smell of burning flesh, the touch of maggot-eaten remains, they short-circuit the ego's defenses. One Western researcher documented an Aghori who slept for months beside a decomposing body until he could no longer distinguish its stench from the scent of temple flowers. That breaking point where disgust flips into equanimity is their holy grail, yet their most misunderstood aspect is their relationship with transgression. Contrary to sensationalized accounts, genuine Aghori don't harm the living or violate consent. Their use of intoxicants or sexual rites, when practiced, follows strict symbolic protocols, a far cry from the chaos attributed to them. The skull they carry, it's always that of someone who donated it willingly, often a fellow ascetic. The tragedy of the Aghori is that their profound philosophy gets overshadowed by grotesque imagery. Behind the shock value lies a sophisticated system of meditation and mantra, preserved through unbroken oral tradition. Their true goal isn't darkness, but a light so bright it burns away all categories where life and death, clean and unclean, self and other dissolve into the pure awareness they call Bhairava, the ultimate reality beyond opposites. For those who dare to look deeper, their message is simple yet terrifying. Liberation doesn't come from avoiding the repulsive, but from recognizing that the repulsive was never truly separate from ourselves to begin with. In a world obsessed with sanitized spirituality, the Aghori stand as living memento mori, reminders that enlightenment isn't pretty, but it is radically free. In the stark desert cliffs overlooking the Dead Sea, where the air shimmers with heat and the earth cracks with thirst, a community of white-robed ascetics once waited for the end of the world. The Essenes weren't just another Jewish sect, they were a radical experiment in holiness, living as if the apocalypse was not merely coming tomorrow, but had already begun. While Pharisees debated law in Jerusalem's temples and Sadducees brokered power with Rome, these desert dwellers turned their backs on society entirely, convinced that purity could only flourish in isolation. Their name, possibly meaning the pious ones or the healers, hinted at their dual mission, to cure a corrupt world by preserving divine truth until God's final judgment. Their daily life was a ritual of extreme devotion. Before dawn, members would immerse in ritual baths, scrubbing their bodies as if preparing for temple service. Except for the Essenes, every moment was temple service. They ate meals in silence, treating common bread and water as sacred offerings. Property was shared absolutely. Joining the community meant surrendering all possessions, a practice that later fascinated early Christian writers. But their most striking custom was their solar calendar, a deliberate rejection of the lunar system used in Jerusalem. For them, time itself had to be recalibrated to match heavenly perfection, with festivals falling on fixed dates like stars in their ordained places. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in 1947 cracked open their world like a sealed jar. Hidden in clay vessels for 2 millennia, these manuscripts revealed a theology of cosmic war. The War Scroll describes an apocalyptic battle where sons of light would crush the sons of darkness, led by a mysterious teacher of righteousness who may have been their founder. Intriguingly, some scrolls speak of a messianic duo, a priestly and kingly figure hinting at beliefs more complex than mainstream Judaism of their era. Their community rule scroll lays out initiation rites so strict that probation lasted 3 years, with penalties for infractions ranging from reduced rations to permanent expulsion. Then there's the enigma of John the Baptist. The Gospels describe him preaching in the same wilderness, baptizing in the Jordan River just miles from Essene settlements. Like them, he wore simple clothing, ate locusts and wild honey, and proclaimed imminent judgment. Was he an Essene who broke away to address the masses? The parallels are tantalizing, but differences matter too. The Essenes shunned outsiders while John actively confronted them. The Essenes practiced repeated ritual washings. John offered a single, transformative baptism. Perhaps most tellingly, no scroll mentions a figure like John, leaving his connection to them forever speculative yet irresistible. Archaeology paints a vivid picture of their end. The ruins of Qumran, their main settlement, show signs of violent destruction, smashed pottery, arrowheads, and a layer of ash dating to the Roman crackdown around 70 CE. Some scholars believe they joined the doomed Jewish revolt, their apocalyptic visions becoming self-fulfilling prophecy. Others suggest they quietly disbanded, their scrolls hidden in caves as a time capsule for future generations. What lingers is their haunting question: how far should one go to keep faith pure? In their obsessive separateness, they preserved texts that reshaped our understanding of biblical history. Yet their strictures also warn of spirituality turned inwards too tightly, where anticipation of the divine becomes a barrier to engaging the flawed, beautiful world outside. The Essenes remind us that sometimes the most fervent keepers of light choose deserts over dinner tables, and in doing so leave behind echoes that outlast empires. In the bustling markets of 3rd century Babylon, where Zoroastrian fire temples stood beside Christian chapels and Buddhist monks traded alms bowls for dates, a prophet named Mani unveiled a vision so vast it threatened to eclipse them all. Born into a Jewish-Christian sect but claiming revelations from a divine twin, Mani synthesized Persia's cosmic dualism with Gnostic Christianity and Buddhist compassion into a faith as ambitious as the Silk Road itself. His doctrine was no humble sect, it was designed as the final, universal religion, one that would absorb and surpass all others. To Zoroastrians, he presented himself as the heir to Zoroaster. To Christians, the paraclete promised by Jesus; to Buddhists, a reincarnation of the Buddha of light. This chameleon-like adaptability wasn't deception, it was theological genius, allowing Manichaeism to slip across borders like water through silk. At its core lay a stark but poetic dualism. The universe was a battlefield between light and darkness, spirit and matter. Unlike the vengeful demiurge of the Gnostics, Mani's light god was locked in an accidental struggle when darkness invaded the realm of light. Particles of divinity became trapped in the tainted material world. Human souls were fragments of that imprisoned light, yearning for liberation. But here's where Mani's system dazzled. He mapped salvation as a cosmic recycling program. Elect monks forbidden to farm or marry, ate vegan meals to harvest light from plants believed concentrated in fruits, then excreted purified particles heavenward through prayer. Lay followers, the hearers, supported them, gaining merit by feeding the elect and confessing sins weekly. It was ecology as theology, centuries before the term existed. The faith spread with astonishing speed. Sogdian traders carried it east to Chang'an, where Tang dynasty emperors initially embraced its vibrant art and anti-materialist message. In the West, Augustine of Hippo was a hero for 9 years before converting to Christianity and turning his rhetorical fury against his former faith. Roman mosaics in Syria depict Manichaean elect in white robes, their faces turned toward a golden sun. Turfen frescoes show them preaching to Uyghur Khans beneath floating lotuses. At its height, Manichaean monasteries from North Africa to Fujian hummed with the copying of illuminated scriptures, some so lavish they used gold ink on indigo parchment, a visual embodiment of light-piercing darkness. Suppression came from all sides. Zoroastrian high priests branded Mani a heretic. He was flayed alive, his skin stuffed with straw and hung from a Persian gate. Christian emperors issued edicts condemning Manichaeans as filthy dualists, their asceticism mistaken for hypocrisy. In China, where they'd been tolerated as a form of Buddhism, a backlash in the 9th century led to mass executions. Their exquisite temples burned, their scriptures buried in the Dunhuang caves for later archaeologists to find. Yet their ideas proved immortal. Bogomil and Cathar dualists may have inherited their cosmic struggle. Dante's circles of hell echo Mani's layered cosmos. Even the word Manichaean survives as shorthand for black and white, thinking a final irony for a faith that saw the universe in shades of warring radiance. What remains most haunting are the personal voices. A scrap of parchment from Egypt written by an ordinary hearer named Irene pleads with her elect spiritual guide, "The darkness in my heart is heavy today. Pray for me that I may gather the scattered light." In the end, Manichaeism's greatest tragedy wasn't its destruction. It was the loss of a world view where every raindrop, every melon sliced open, every breath exhaled was part of an epic divine rescue mission. For nearly 2,000 years, pilgrims walked the sacred way from Athens to Eleusis, their hearts pounding with a mix of terror and hope as they approached the gates of the most famous mystery cult in the ancient world. The Eleusinian mysteries weren't just rituals, they were a full-body, full-soul experience, so profound that initiates faced execution for revealing their secrets. Unlike typical Greek religion focused on appeasing gods, This was personal transformation cloaked in torchlight and sacred drama, promising not just a better afterlife but a glimpse of divinity itself. At the center stood the myth of Demeter and Persephone, but the initiates didn't merely hear the story, they lived it. After days of fasting and purification at the Athenian Agora, candidates marched 14 miles to Eleusis, reenacting Demeter's grief-stricken search for her kidnapped daughter. At nightfall, they entered the Telesterion, a vast hall designed to hold thousands, its ceiling engineered to disappear suddenly, plunging the space into total darkness. Then came the climax, the epopteia, the moment of seeing. Ancient accounts hint at a brilliant light erupting in the void, accompanied by a vision of Persephone's return from the underworld. Initiates emerged weeping, some claiming they'd stared into the face of eternity. What caused these transcendent experiences? Strong evidence points to a sacred potion called Kaikayan. Unlike ordinary barley water, this brew likely contained ergot, a fungus related to LSD, which grew naturally on Greek grain. Chemical analysis of vessels from Eleusis found traces of ergot compounds, while ancient texts describe initiates drinking a mint-flavored slurry before visions began. The effects would have been unforgettable hallucinations of radiant goddesses, the dissolution of ego, and the visceral certainty that death was merely a doorway. Notably, the rites were open to all enslaved people, women, even non-Greeks, as long as they spoke Greek and hadn't committed murder. In a deeply hierarchical society, this egalitarian access to the divine was revolutionary. The mystery's longevity was no accident. Running annually from around 1500 BCE to the 4th century CE, they survived Persian invasions, Roman conquests, and Christian edicts because they delivered what they promised, an unshakable shift in perception. Famous initiates from Sophocles to Cicero wrote of losing all fear of death. Plato may have borrowed his cave allegory from Eleusinian light and shadow rituals. Even when Christian emperors like Theodosius outlawed pagan rites, locals continued smuggling statues of Demeter into caves for clandestine ceremonies. The final irony, Christianity itself borrowed Eleusinian motifs. The early Eucharist's shared meal and promise of eternal life paralleled the Kaikayan's communal ecstasy. Some scholars argue that Paul's conversion on the road to Damascus, with its blinding light and voice from heaven, reads like an Eleusinian initiation turned inward. What the ancients experienced physically, later mystics sought spiritually, proof that even in extinction, the mystery's central revelation endured, that a single night of awe could unravel a lifetime of fear. Their greatest secret wasn't the Kaikayan's recipe, but the radical idea that transcendence belongs not to priests or philosophers, but to anyone brave enough to walk the sacred path in darkness, trusting the light will come. Beneath the towering cliffs of Mount Dindymus in ancient Phrygia, the air pulsed with wild drumbeats and the clash of cymbals as worshippers of Cybele danced themselves into ecstatic trances, a sight so shockingly primal that it both fascinated and terrified the civilized world. Known as Magna Mater, the Great Mother, Cybele wasn't just another fertility goddess. She was the untamable force of nature itself, a deity of caverns and mountain peaks who rode lions into battle and demanded absolute devotion. Her priests, the Galli, were unlike any others in the ancient world, self-castrated eunuchs who dressed in flowing feminine robes, their hair long and perfumed, their rituals a whirlwind of blood, music, and divine madness. To join her priesthood wasn't a choice, it was a possession. According to legend, her first high priest, Attis, was driven to slice off his own genitals in a fit of divine frenzy after betraying her. From that moment forward, her followers reenacted this violent surrender annually, turning personal sacrifice into a gateway to transcendent power. Rome's adoption of Cybele's cult in 204 BCE is one of history's great ironies. Desperate to defeat Hannibal during the Second Punic War, the Senate consulted the Sibylline books, which declared that only the Great Mother could save them. They sent envoys to retrieve her sacred black meteorite, the embodiment of the goddess herself from Pessinus. Yet when Cybele arrived in Rome, the city recoiled. Her priesthoods frenzied rites, which included slashing their arms to sprinkle altars with blood, clashed with Rome's disciplined piety. The solution? A legal paradox. While the state sanctioned her annual festival, the megalesia, Roman citizens were forbidden to become Galli. Only foreigners, often Phrygian slaves, could perform the castration rite, allowing Rome to harness Cybele's power while keeping her chaos at arm's length. The rituals were a spectacle of controlled anarchy. During the annual Dies Sanguinis, Day of Blood, initiates would whip themselves into a frenzy to the pounding of tympanum drums, their self-inflicted wounds mirroring Attis's mutilation. The climax came with the Taurobolium, where devotees stood beneath a wooden grate as a bull was sacrificed above them, its blood drenching them in a grotesque baptism of rebirth. Some accounts describe participants emerging convinced they'd been born again for another 20 years, a phrase early Christians would later repurpose. What made Cybele's cult endure wasn't just shock value, but its psychological genius. In a world where masculinity was tied to physical wholeness, the Galli's deliberate rejection of that ideal offered a perverse kind of liberation. Their castration wasn't seen as loss, but as transcendence, a shedding of worldly identity to become conduits of divine energy. Even their attire blurred boundaries. Surviving statues show them with delicate features and intricate jewelry, challenging rigid gender norms centuries before such ideas entered mainstream discourse. Modern excavations at Cybele's Palatine Hill Temple in Rome reveal just how deeply she permeated imperial life. Archaeologists found votive offerings ranging from tiny silver votive breasts, thank you gifts for healing, to curse tablets invoking her wrath against enemies. Poets like Catullus wrote scandalized accounts of her rites, while Emperor Claudius officially added her festivals to the Roman calendar, proof that even the empire's stern facade couldn't resist the raw power of the divine feminine. Cybele's legacy lingers in unexpected corners. Some scholars trace elements of her worship to later cults of the Virgin Mary, particularly in Mediterranean regions where devotion to a sorrowing mother figure remained potent. The drum-heavy processions of her Galli priests find echoes in modern carnival traditions, where chaos briefly inverts social order, and in an age questioning rigid gender roles, her cult's embrace of fluidity feels strikingly contemporary. The Great Mother's lesson was simple yet subversive. True devotion isn't tidy, and the divine doesn't always arrive in forms we find comfortable. Sometimes it roars in on the back of a lion, demanding surrender to forces wilder than reason itself. Deep beneath the bustling streets of ancient Rome, in windowless chambers lit only by flickering torches, men gathered to partake in rituals so secret that even today their full meaning remains elusive. The Mithraic mysteries, centered around the god Mithras, weren't just another pagan cult. They were an exclusive brotherhood that combined cosmic symbolism with the camaraderie of a soldier's lodge. Unlike the public festivals for Jupiter or Venus, Mithraic ceremonies unfolded in underground temples called Mithraea, intimate spaces designed to mirror the cavern where Mithras supposedly slew the cosmic bull, an act believed to generate life from death. These sanctuaries, often tucked beneath ordinary buildings, were deliberately small, holding maybe 30 initiates at most, creating an atmosphere thick with secrecy and brotherhood. What made this cult so compelling was its perfect alignment with Roman military values. Mithras, often depicted in a Phrygian cap stabbing the bull, embodied discipline, loyalty, and victory, qualities every legionary aspired to. The all-male membership, drawn heavily from soldiers, merchants, and bureaucrats, wasn't just a social club. It was a spiritual reinforcement of the empire's masculine ideals. Initiates advanced through 7 grades, each with its own trials and planetary associations: Raven, Bridegroom, Soldier, Lion, Persian, Heliodromus, Sunrunner, and finally Pater Father. The progression wasn't merely ceremonial. Each stage demanded deeper commitment, mirroring the military's hierarchy while weaving in astrological symbolism. A lion, for instance, was associated with Jupiter and fire, undergoing rituals where honey was dabbed on his tongue to purify his speech, while a heliodromus took on solar attributes, wearing radiant crowns in ceremonies. The rituals themselves were a blend of theater and transcendence. Frescoes in the Santa Prisca Mithraeum in Rome show initiates in animal masks, likely reenacting Mithras's mythical feats. Some scholars suggest psychedelic substances might have been involved. Images of chalices and snakes coil through the artwork, hinting at visionary experiences. The climactic Tauroctony scene found in every Mithraeum wasn't just decoration, it was a celestial map. The bull's blood became the Milky Way, the scorpion at its genitals represented Scorpio, and the dog jumping to catch the blood symbolized Canis Minor. Every element encoded astronomical knowledge, turning the temple into a microcosm of the universe. But why did this wildly popular cult vanish almost completely? Unlike other pagan religions absorbed or suppressed by Christianity, Mithraism left few traces after the 4th century. One theory points to its exclusivity. The refusal to admit women or slaves may have limited its growth. Another suggests its dependence on close-knit, secretive cells made it vulnerable once imperial support shifted to Christianity. Yet echoes of its symbolism survive where you'd least expect. The date of Mithras's birth, December 25th, was later adopted for Christmas. The concept of a sacred meal shared between God and devotee parallels Christian communion. Even the image of Mithras carrying a bull on his shoulders resembles the Good Shepherd motif in early Christian art. The real mystery isn't what the Mithraists believed, it's how something so widespread could dissolve so thoroughly, leaving only whispers in the stones of its hidden temples. In the dusty streets of Harran, a city straddling the border between modern Turkey and Syria, a community of star worshippers defied the tides of history long after the ancient world had faded. The Sabians weren't just another pagan holdout in the Islamic era, they were masterful cultural chameleons, simultaneously preserving Babylonian astral theology while becoming indispensable to the scientific revolution of the Abbasid Caliphate. When the Quran granted protected status to people of the book, this enigmatic group claimed lineage from the star-gazing prophets mentioned in sacred texts, cleverly securing their survival in a changing world. Their survival strategy was as ingenious as it was audacious, dressing ancient Mesopotamian rituals in the language of monotheism while secretly maintaining rites unchanged since the days when Harran served as the cult center for the moon god Sin. Their temples were living observatories, their rituals a fusion of mystical astronomy and precise mathematics. Unlike conventional mosques or churches, Sabian prayer halls aligned not toward Mecca or Jerusalem, but to the specific celestial configurations they considered sacred. Initiates underwent rigorous training in the science of the stars, memorizing the movements of planets with an accuracy that would later astonish Muslim astronomers. By day, they might be seen calculating eclipse cycles or compiling star catalogues. By night, performing rituals where incense was burned in patterns mirroring constellations, accompanied by chants in a dialect preserving elements of long-dead Akkadian. What made them indispensable to the Islamic Golden Age was their role as translators and innovators. When Caliph al-Ma'mun established the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, it was Sabian scholars like Thabit ibn Qurra who rendered Greek scientific texts into Arabic, often adding groundbreaking commentaries. This mathematician-astronomer, descended from Harran's priestly class, didn't just translate Euclid, he corrected errors in Ptolemy's models and developed theories of trepidation that influenced Copernicus centuries later. The Sabians became the keepers of forbidden knowledge, their temples functioning as libraries for texts deemed too valuable to destroy yet too pagan to openly celebrate. Their most startling survival tactic was theological ambiguity. by emphasizing Abraham's supposed connection to their star wisdom, claiming he was born among them before rejecting idolatry. They navigated the dangerous waters between Islam's strict monotheism and their own complex cosmology. To outsiders, their veneration of planetary spirits might resemble Sufi angelology. Their ritual ablutions in sacred wells could be framed as parallel to Islamic voodoo. Even their signature emerald tablets inscribed with celestial invocations were presented as divine names rather than idols, a linguistic sleight of hand that preserved traditions dating back to the Epic of Gilgamesh. Modern archaeology reveals glimpses of their dual existence. Excavations at Harran show a 9th-century mosque built directly atop the ruins of Sin's temple, its foundation stones bearing cuneiform inscriptions hastily plastered over. Nearby, private homes contained hidden altars with astrological mosaics, proof that their star worship continued behind closed doors. The last known Sabian stronghold fell in the 13th century when Mongol invasions shattered Harran's intellectual community, but their legacy endures in unexpected ways, from the zodiac motifs woven into medieval Islamic textiles to the astronomical tables that enabled Newton's physics. The Sabians' true lesson wasn't just about preserving the past, but demonstrating how knowledge, when wrapped carefully, can outlast even the most determined attempts at erasure. In the smoky drawing rooms of late 19th century New York, where seances and scientific discoveries competed for attention, a Russian mystic named Helena Blavatsky dropped a bombshell, an ancient wisdom tradition she claimed had been secretly guiding humanity's evolution for millennia. This was the birth cry of the Theosophical Society, a movement that would bridge Victorian occultism and modern spirituality, weaving threads from Egyptian Hermeticism, Buddhist reincarnation, and Hindu karma into a tapestry as controversial as it was influential. Unlike secretive mystery schools of the past, Theosophy proclaimed its mission openly: to uncover the universal truths behind all religions, guided by hidden adepts called the Mahatmas, enlightened beings who supposedly dwelled in the remote Himalayas, communicating through psychic letters materializing in Blavatsky's tobacco-filled apartment. The Society's claims were audacious yet meticulously packaged. Blavatsky's masterwork, The Secret Doctrine, purported to decode an ancient manuscript called the Book of Zion, written in the mythical language of Senzar, that revealed cyclic epochs of human civilization, from the ethereal root races of Lemuria to our current materialistic age. To skeptics, it was fantastical fiction. To followers, it was a Rosetta Stone linking Plato's Atlantis to Hindu yugas and Native American origin myths. What made Theosophy unique wasn't just its syncretism, but its claim of scientific rigor. Blavatsky insisted her teachings aligned with Darwinian evolution, though she spiritualized it, proposing consciousness drove mutation, and preempted then-emerging physics about atomic structure, a tactic that lent her ideas an air of prophetic credibility. Central to their cosmology were the Mahatmas, particularly the mysterious masters Maurya and Kut Humi. These weren't metaphors, but flesh and blood sages, albeit with superhuman abilities like teleportation and astral projection. Blavatsky's followers swore they received letters from these adepts, penned in gold ink on delicate rice paper, appearing suddenly in sealed rooms. When critics like the Society for Psychical Research exposed some as forgeries, the scandal only deepened the intrigue. Yet the Mahatma mythos struck a chord, echoing older traditions of hidden guides, from the Rosicrucian Invisible College to the Shambhala legends of Tibetan Buddhism. Theosophy's genius lay in democratizing esotericism. Blavatsky's successor, Annie Besant, brought the movement to India, where it ironically helped revive Hinduism and Buddhism even as it reinterpreted them. The Society's Adyar headquarters became a crossroads where Indian freedom fighters like Gandhi rubbed shoulders with British suffragettes and artists like Kandinsky, who credited Theosophy with inspiring abstract art's spiritual dimensions. Their Jiddu Krishnamurti experiment, declaring a young Indian boy as the coming world teacher, imploded when Krishnamurti renounced the role, but not before leaving an indelible mark on 20th century spirituality. Modern echoes of theosophy are everywhere, from the law of attraction to yoga studios' chakra charts. The New Age movement is its rebellious grandchild, retaining the cosmic optimism but ditching the hierarchical secrecy. Even criticisms of cultural appropriation trace back to theosophy's habit of repackaging Eastern concepts for Western audiences. Yet their lasting gift wasn't any single doctrine, but the radical idea that spirituality could be global, experimental, and unshackled from dogma, a notion so potent it outlived its founders' excesses and still whispers through our search for meaning today. In the gaslit parlors of Victorian London, where spiritualism rubbed shoulders with scientific discovery, three Freemasons founded a society that would redefine Western occultism, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. More than just another secretive fraternity, this group claimed access to an unbroken chain of esoteric wisdom stretching back to ancient Egypt, distilled into a step-by-step system of magic that promised enlightenment through rigorous ritual practice. Their vaulted initiation halls became laboratories of the soul, where ceremonial robes replaced lab coats and incense smoke swirled like alchemical vapors above intricately painted pentagrams. At the heart of their practice was the cipher manuscripts, a set of encrypted pages supposedly discovered in a London bookstall, written in a complex code that revealed graded rituals mirroring the Kabbalistic tree of life. Members progressed from neophyte to ipsissimus through 10 degrees, each unlocking new magical techniques. The outer order learned basic astrology and tarot symbolism, while the inner second order practiced astral projection, elemental evocations, and the construction of magical weapons like the lotus wand, a tool inscribed with zodiacal glyphs said to focus celestial energies. Their vaults contained something even more extraordinary: the Rosicrucian-style Vault of the Adepti, a 7-sided chamber painted with alchemical and Egyptian motifs where initiates underwent transformative visions under the guidance of invisible, secret chiefs. No member embodied or shattered the Golden Dawn's ideals more explosively than Aleister Crowley. Joined in 1898 under the motto "Perdurabo, I will endure," the young poet quickly ascended the ranks, drawn to the order's synthesis of ceremonial magic and personal transformation. His infamous Abramelin ritual at Boleskine House, intended to summon his holy guardian angel, instead spiraled into chaos according to his diary's poltergeist activity, psychic attacks, and a servant's mental breakdown hinting at forces even Crowley couldn't control. Yet his greatest impact came after schisms tore the order apart. Fusing Golden Dawn techniques with his own revelations in the Book of the Law, Crowley birthed the lemma, turning the order's structured mysticism into a radically individualistic path. The Golden Dawn's true legacy lies in its democratization of occult knowledge. For the first time, women like Moina Mather's co-founder Samuel Mather's wife held equal standing, designing rituals and leading initiations. Poet W.B. Yeats used its symbolism in his verse, while Arthur Machen wove its imagery into supernatural fiction. Even skeptics benefited. Florence Farr's experiments with vibrational mantras predated modern sound therapy. Their greatest innovation may have been the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, still practiced today, a psychological reset button combining Hebrew divine names, elemental quarter calls, and visualization to cleanse mind and space. Despite its early 20th century collapse amid financial scandals and ego clashes, the Golden Dawn's fingerprints are everywhere. Modern tarot decks owe their symbolism to MacGregor Mather's interpretations. Neo-pagan rituals borrow its elemental correspondences. Even Jungian psychology echoes its archetypal explorations. The Order's ultimate lesson was that magic isn't about supernatural domination, but meticulous self-alchemy, where every incantation, every colored candle, every traced symbol is a mirror held up to the operator's own limitless potential. Their temples may have faded, but their light still glimmers in every seeker who dares to whisper, "In the name of the Lord of the universe, let the magical work begin." From the desert-dwelling Essenes preserving sacred scrolls to the Himalayan whispering theosophists chasing cosmic masters, these forgotten orders formed an invisible tapestry of human longing, threads of mysticism, rebellion, and transcendence woven outside mainstream history. Some vanished in blood and fire, like the Cathars singing as flames consumed them at Mont Saga. Others adapted like chameleons, the Druze camouflaging star worship as monotheism, the Mandeans turning riverbanks into hidden sanctuaries. A few, like the Golden Dawn, imploded from within, their secrets spilling into popular culture through tarot decks and ritual magic manuals. What determined their survival wasn't just the strength of their ideas, but their ability to walk the razor's edge, holding enough power to inspire, yet staying hidden enough to avoid annihilation. Their legacies pulse in unexpected places. The Mithraists' winter solstice celebrations echo in Christmas festivities. The Pythagorean belief in a mathematical universe birthed modern physics. The Therapeutae communal living foreshadowed monastic traditions across 3 religions. Even failures left marks. Manichaeism's cosmic dualism resurfaced in medieval heresies, while the Hashashin's psychological warfare tactics haunt modern intelligence operations. The most enduring orders understood that wisdom isn't just preserved in texts, but in living practices. The Safed Kabbalists embedding divine sparks in everyday acts, the Shingon Buddhists turning ritual into multisensory enlightenment technology. Yet their collective disappearance poses an unsettling question. Did these groups fade because their time had passed, or because the world wasn't ready for their revelations? The Ophite serpent wisdom challenged moral binaries we still struggle with today. The free spirit's radical liberation predated existential philosophy by centuries. The Eleusinian mysteries offered psychedelic transcendence long before modern science understood its potential. Perhaps their greatest lesson is that esoteric traditions don't truly die. They retreat into the cultural subconscious, waiting for the moment when society catches up to their vision. So we're left standing at the edge of history's labyrinth, flashlight in hand, illuminating fragments of something vast and shadowy. Which of these orders speaks to you? Is it the Bogomil's defiant purity, the Aghori's shocking embrace of decay, or the Rosicrucian's promise of an invisible college guiding humanity? The conversation doesn't end here, it begins. Share your thoughts below, and who knows, perhaps some forgotten thread of wisdom is waiting for you to pick it up and weave it into the present. After all, isn't every era just a palimpsest, with the past's faint writing always visible beneath the surface if you know how